Dave's trying to come up and engage a press. He's going for it like never before.
Notorious in the arm wrestling world for his raw power and stoic demeanor, despite suffering from several serious injuries, Dave Chaffee has been at the top of the elites in the sport for almost as long as he has been arm wrestling. Lately though, it's safe to say this super heavyweight contender has been going through a rough patch and has accrued a number of unfortunate losses. Therefore, it seems like the perfect time to illuminate Dave Chaffee's career and life in arm wrestling. I am the Arm Historian, and today I'll be your tour guide as we look at the rise and fall of Dave Chaffee. David Chaffee was welcomed into the world on the 20th of January 1977 and found himself at a young age to be living in Erie, Pennsylvania, a place he would end up calling home until this day. Although little is publicly known about Dave's childhood and life as a young adult, he has mentioned having arm wrestled with friends from a young age and doing well at it. His father was also clearly instrumental to Dave's development as an athlete, supporting his son throughout his career, being present at a lot of Dave's sporting endeavors. Among these were basketball, baseball, and football, sports he played throughout high school. It's clear that Chaffee also had a lot of potential for strength sports, which led him to develop his power throughout early adulthood. By the time 2006 came around, at the age of 29, Chaffee was working at a local gym and couldn't help but notice a flyer on the wall. The poster was advertising an upcoming arm wrestling tournament, set to take place in November of that same year. Dave remembered that he knew of someone who had told him earlier he was an arm wrestler. Intrigued by the prospect of competitive arm wrestling, he decided to reach out to the man and ended up meeting at his house to learn about the sport. James Wagner was an already accomplished arm wrestler and was more than happy to welcome the strong and physically imposing Dave Chaffee into the sport. Dave would go on to participate in the aforementioned tournament and ended up coming in first place, a true testament to the raw power he already possessed. In Dave's second tournament, however, in the Ohio State's amateur division of 2007, disaster struck as the fledgling arm wrestler broke his right arm during a match with Doug Allen. With the unending support and encouragement from his training partners, which now also included the notorious future WAL ref Bart Wood, this unfortunate incident didn't dissuade Dave from continuing his journey within the arm wrestling world. He let his right arm heal for about a year, but continued general training. Despite his motivation for the sport, this injury would prove later to be the first in a rather long string of trauma to his body that would eventually catch up with the athlete. Throughout the following years though, Chaffee would start dedicating more time to training on the table, as well as ramping up his gym time. He would later stay to have table time once every week, and trained at the gym or at home every remaining day of the week, sometimes making time for 2 to 3 training sessions every day. In 2009, Dave had set his sights on the US Nationals, but decided this time he would try to cut weight to enter into a lower weight category. He ended up weighing in at under 220 pounds, a weight far below his usual. In his own words, this led to a significant loss in power, and in hindsight was deemed a bad idea. From this time on, Dave would start his undeniable ascent and cemented himself as a mainstay among the super heavyweight elite within the sport of competitive arm wrestling. As a first major accomplishment, he ended up participating in the 2010 WAF World Championships and securing gold in the 110 kg right-hand class. Throughout the next couple of years, Dave showed his unrelenting training was starting to pay off in a major way, doing very well at several high-stakes tournaments. One such event was the 2011 Arnold Classic, where he would make it all the way to the semi-finals, losing out against another powerhouse in arm wrestling, but from the East. Denis Cyplenkov and Dave Chaffee were often compared within arm wrestling circles, and the two would eventually form a long-lasting, friendly rivalry. Another example where the two juggernauts showcased their awesome power was at the 2013 edition of the Nemiroff Cup, also known as the Zloty Tour. During the tournament, Dave surprised everyone by beating Denis, who was on quite a lengthy winning streak. This feat helped propel Dave to be in the conversation for truly being amongst a world-class openweight elite. Fresh off the airplane, returning from the Nemiroff Cup, Dave joined as a prominent cast member of the newly conceived arm wrestling reality TV show Game of Arms. When talking about Game of Arms in retrospect, Dave denotes traveling and socializing to be his favorite aspects of the show. He didn't care much for the cameras and more dramatic twists, as he describes himself as a quiet guy and being quite camera shy. If you want to learn more about Dave's role in Game of Arms or about the reality show in general, be sure to watch my video on the subject after you finish this video. After his noteworthy appearance on Game of Arms, Dave was made aware of a new arm wrestling league being started in North America. The WAL, or the World Arm Wrestling League, had close ties to the Game of Arms, and Dave's longtime friend and training partner, Bart Wood, ended up becoming a head referee in the league. Chaffee would go on to compete in every year the WAL was organized and would turn out to be a top contender for first place in the Openweight Championships every time. He won the Super Heavyweight Championships on the right in 2014 and 2015, and narrowly came in second in 2016 and 2017, losing out to Travis Bagent and Michael Todd respectively. During the Supermatch era of WAL, in the subsequent years, Dave also did really well on a consistent level, having wins over some of the most impressive names in arm wrestling. If you want to learn more about the World Arm Wrestling League, including but not limited to Dave Chaffee, be sure to check out my video on the topic after watching this video. During and after the conception of the WAL, Dave would never shy away from entering local as well as international tournaments and vendetta or super matches. It seems that by way of more exposure within the arm wrestling scene and beyond, he gets categorized as an extremely powerful puller, but someone lacking in the more technical aspects of the sport. The mantra of Dave using almost exclusively side pressure has been repeated ad nauseum by now. This reputation would follow the athlete throughout his career, and a lot of people's views on Dave Chaffee as a professional arm wrestler has only become more nuanced during the last few years. When the COVID pandemic hit, a lot of potential matches and events fell through, and Dave Chaffee was not exempt from this. When a big part of the world opened up again to international travel, Dave jumped at the opportunity to measure himself to the top of the elites within the sport once again. In September of 2021, as part of a top 8 BAL match, Dave was given the opportunity to challenge the undisputed #1 puller in the world, Levan Saginashvili. During the match, it became clear that Levan outpowered Dave rather easily, after which Dave lost 0-6. He would later clarify that he tried slipping from the Georgian giant, but his hand control was too strong. Obviously not deterred by this rather expected loss, Dave would enter one of the most fully booked years in his arm wrestling career, participating multiple times in the two top-tier international leagues, King of the Table and East vs West. One of these matches came in April of 2022 at King of the Table 3. Chaffee was set to face the Polish giant Alex Kurdecha. Kurdecha's stock in the international rankings was at an all-time high around this time, so when Dave defeated him in a rather convincing 5-1, his own status rose significantly once again. Perhaps for that reason he was thrown into the deep end of the super heavyweights at East vs West. With only about 3 months between the matches, he faced veteran Georgian athlete Gennady Krikvinya in May of 2022, and straight after that, Kazakhstani rising superstar Artyom Morozov in August. Both matches played out much in the same way, with Dave quickly overpowering his opponents in the first 2 rounds. After this though, he seemingly gassed out and lost the subsequent 3 rounds, and by that the match. A couple of months later, Dave would face another giant in the Russian ice road trucker, Vitaly Laletin. This match, held at King of the Table 5 in October of 2022, turned out to be one of, if not the most entertaining and grueling match of Dave's career. This 7-round death match, which Dave ultimately won, dispelled all doubts about Dave's versatility and endurance on the table, or lack thereof, with the South American often transitioning to a full-on press. Just over a month and a half after this draining super match, Dave would face an even bigger challenge in the then arguably world #2 Italian gladiator Hermes Gasparini. Although both athletes were visibly winded by the end, and Dave managed to give Hermes a true battle, the Italian ended up sweeping the match 3-0. 2 East vs West events later, during May of 2023, Dave faced the veteran Georgian puller Revaz Lutidze. Lutidze was clearly on the way up in the rankings and wanted to make a point in his match against Dave. With Revaz seemingly succeeding in what he set out to do, Chaffee got spanked in blistering fashion 3-0, with the American not even being able to slip out of Revaz's iron grip. Dave's most recent super match was a rematch of sorts, with his longtime frenemy, Devon Larratt. Much like the lead-up to their earlier WAL match, the vitriol and general trash talk was plentiful and at times almost believable. On the 25th of June 2023, at King of the Table 7 in Dubai, the two titans of North American arm wrestling faced each other once again. This time, however, the way the match played out was radically different. From the first round on, it became apparent quickly that Devon was able to take control of the entire affair. Chaffee became aware of this fact early on in their clash and seemed for the most part to accept his fate. Dave lost the match in convincing fashion and shortly after would announce a break in his arm wrestling career after August of the same year, even hinting at a possible retirement. This will come after a match he had scheduled with the young Bulgarian, Yordan Tsonev. Opinions from arm wrestling fans were sloppily lobbed in Dave's direction, sometimes claiming Dave just accepted as many matches as he could for financial gain, even though he knew he couldn't win due to injury. Chaffee's longtime nickname of Easy Money didn't help matters here. The athlete seemed to find a lot of support and refuge with his family though. From social media posts and interviews, it is clear Dave has a lot of love and dedication for his wife and children. Tangentially, he also possesses two rather prominent tattoos on his arms, both related to his favorite video game, Grand Theft Auto. Gaming apparently plays a big role in the life of Dave and his family, with the music at his wedding even coming directly from the video game. Although at times Dave did fairly to very well on the left arm, it's safe to say his right far outweighed the strength and mobility of his left arm and hand. A big part of the reason for this is that throughout his career he has accumulated a number of neck injuries, resulting in part of his left arm to atrophy and even two fingers becoming completely numb. These injuries also had a substantial effect on Chaffee's overall health and strength, with the athlete's performance on the table with the right arm often being directly correlated to the current status of his injuries. Dave has always been candid about his neck injury and other qualms that limited his body, but never explicitly offered this as an excuse for poor performance. In this way, it's safe to say that part of Dave's revered status within the sport is not only owed to his tremendous strength, but also his unflappable sense of sportsmanship and pragmatic modesty before, during, and after matches. In post-match interviews, win or lose, I've never observed Dave Chaffee to be anything but generous to his opponents and level-headed towards his own prowess as an arm wrestler. It's clear Dave Chaffee is an avid arm wrestler who possesses, when physically healthy, an extreme potential for explosive strength and fighting spirit on the arm wrestling table. Despite his rather understated demeanor compared to his arm wrestling peers, I believe it is clear from his history within the sport that he cares a great deal about the sport and its development. On a personal note, I hope Dave Chaffee finds his way back to the higher echelons of the tournament scene after a well-deserved break. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Rise and Fall. If you want to learn more about the history of arm wrestling or the many interesting athletes within the sport, check out my other videos. As always, a major shout out to all the Armians and Fingerfolk and everyone that is watching up until this point. You're keeping the Arm Historian alive. Arm Historian, out.